I'm going to give you an overview of what was in GlyphWorks in this latest release. So we released version 9 of GlyphWorks in January. And can everyone hear me okay? Is this coming through okay? Yeah, good. So I'm just going to give you a summary of what was in it. It's not everything that was in the release, but just hit some of the points that I thought might be of interest to you. And tomorrow, obviously, we're going to be talking more about what's in our CAE products. So for right now here, I'm focusing on GlyphWorks. And again, for those who are less familiar with our product range, we have 3 main products. We have Design Life that does fatigue from finite element models. So take stress results from your FE analysis and predict fatigue. We also have GlyphWorks that we're going to talk about right now, which is being able to process, as just a great example there from Toyota, how to process a large amount of data that would have taken hours to do manually. That's one of the key strengths of GlyphWorks, to be able to process large amounts of data. But its other strength is the fact the expertise of ENCODE is primarily in the area of durability. So a lot of the key capabilities of GlyphWorks is all about doing fatigue analysis or durability predictions from that measured data, or things that help you understand how products are being used, that help you understand if they're fit for purpose. And the third product that we will be talking about more today is ENCODE Automation, which is managing of that data, and Tenneco referenced that. That's what they're using to help when they're gathering all this data from their fleets of vehicles. They're using that to then organize that, make that available in a web-based environment for collaboration. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, just worth mentioning also that ENCODE CDS licensing. ENCODE CDS licensing is, if you like, a token-based system, so that you have access to GlyphWorks, Design Life, and even a desktop version of Automation, and you can then mix and match all the functionality without you having to pick, I want this particular product option or this product option. Basically, you get access to it all. How many of you are using ENCODE CDS licensing, or do you know if you're using ENCODE CDS? A few of you. It's really actually picked up in terms of its how popular it's been over the last year or so. It's actually now our biggest seller in terms of how people are buying our software is through CDS. So Kurt, thanks to Kurt, thank you. You've already been through a couple of some of the key new features in version 9. One of the things you just saw was the new XYZ display. And this is effectively a 3D cluster plot. You can, as Kurt demonstrated, you can have your 3 dimensions. You've also got color. You've also got size. You've actually got 5 dimensions of data to visualize. You can rotate it around dynamically to be able to visualize it. One thing that Kurt didn't show is if you hover your mouse over it, it will actually give you a tooltip to give you what the actual color and size and values are at that point. So you can interact with the data as well to pull values out for it. So it's very good at looking at relationships of data and outliers of data in a dynamic way like that. So that's something that's new. It has a lot of applications here. We're looking at, again, the sort of data that Kurt was looking at, vehicle speed. But really, you could look at any data that you want to visualize graphically. And that's something you would find very difficult to do in Excel. Excel has got some great strengths, but being able to have dynamic plots that you could then rotate and look at the data, that wouldn't be able to do. It starts slowing down if you throw, just practically speaking, if you start throwing more than like 50,000 points at that thing, then you'll see it kind of blanks out while you rotate it around and it redraws again. So you lose some of the full dynamic capability when you start looking at hundreds of thousands of data points. But if you're less than about 50,000 points, you can just spin it around in space. The second one was also what Kurt mentioned, is the ability in the GPS display to actually be able to color the trace on the plot. So here you've got speed on a data on a racetrack. You can identify what happened where in color. One thing that Kurt, again, just to highlight some other capability, you can have a full legend on the side as well to show you what the colors represent. So there's a couple of new graphical capabilities you've already seen in version 9. Just wanted to rewind slightly and show some other capabilities that came out since the last major release. So in the middle of last year, we added a few new glyphs into GlyphWorks as part of a mid-year update. And so this is one that you may not have seen or used up to this point, which is the trend removal glyph. So this is, it's one thing to find problems in your data. It's another thing to know what to do about them. And in this case, we're looking for things where you've maybe got a drift in your signal. Maybe you've got a temperature affecting a strain measurement, and your data's drifting off because of a temperature effect. This glyph, the trend removal glyph, enables you to either use a linear fit or a polynomial fit through your data and remove a trend, as the name suggests, in a channel. It does that on a channel-by-channel basis. In fact, you can even identify up to 3 different regions in your signal to apply the correction to separately. So, for example, you may not have had that correction right at the beginning of your data file. Maybe it's a static straight line or not temperature affected, but the rest of your data has got it, and you can apply that correction just on those portions. Another aspect of the glyph is to remove an offset based on the mean of a defined time section. So, for example, when you start doing your data acquisition, for the first few seconds or for the first minute or so, maybe the vehicle isn't moving, it's a flat line, but you can see at that portion of time, the data's not zeroed. And what you want to do is remove that mean offset from your whole data, zero the channel, in effect. You could do this before with GlyphWorks if you were Kurt and you knew what you were doing with different glyphs and extracting sections and calculating metadata and then doing it. So if you're good with GlyphWorks, you could do this. But what we've done here in the trend removal glyph is basically said, I'm going to define a portion of time in this signal and calculate the mean, and whatever the mean is in that portion of the signal, remove it from the whole channel. So again, very useful just for zeroing out channels. Another glyph we added mid-year was a Weibull analysis glyph. So Weibull analysis is getting more towards reliability rather than durability. So this is now looking at the statistical failure rates that you actually see in the field. So this is looking at observed failures where you've seen that a product fails after 100 hours or 200 hours or 300 hours, and you're starting to gather real-world reliability information. It has other applications as well. But a Weibull distribution has been shown to be a very good way of fitting failure data. And it's another type of distribution, like a Rayleigh distribution or a normal distribution. It's another type of distribution that's been shown to be very good at fitting small numbers of data points that you have. You've only got a few observed failures, but to come up with an accurate representation of statistical representation of reliability. So this Weibull analysis enables you to take measured data points and then do a Weibull fit through it to calculate then what might be, let's say, the B10 life. What's the probability, or what's the 10% probability of failure after how long or how many repeats? So it's a calculation of reliability. And we've also, previously, we've also enhanced the XYZ display, sorry, the XY display to also be able to use Weibull axes in the plot, so you can then plot the data in a straight line. So that on Weibull paper, a Weibull plot then forms a straight line. So that's a new glyph. And a third new glyph in the ISR 1 mid-year was this PSD terrain flow glyph. So this is all about how do you take data that you've got in the frequency domain and how do you do a fatigue analysis on it? How do you start, if I've just got, let's say, a PSD, power spectral density, you've got some wiggly line against frequency in hertz, you've got some representation of the frequency content of this signal. How do I predict a fatigue analysis from that? Well, this enables you to go, this glyph enables you to go from a PSD in the frequency domain to a rainflow cycle count. So how many cycles do you have of what size? And then you can feed that directly into the regular fatigue analysis glyphs. One application for this sort of technology is just to get a relative measure of fatigue damage. The good thing about fatigue is it kind of boils everything down just to one number. How severe was this loading? And you may want to do that just for an accelerometer measurement. So you've just measured it, you've got accelerometer data on your vehicle, you're driving on the proving ground, and you want to get a relative measure. If you do that if you've got time series data, that's fine. Just do a relative damage calculation, do like a pseudo simple SN type calculation. If, however, you only have, or if all you've got available, because that's what you've got measured, is a PSD, then that's more difficult. How do I compare the relative damage of this PSD versus this PSD? And this glyph actually has built into it a relative damage calculation, so you don't need any other fatigue glyphs. You'll literally compute and calculate a relative damage number for this PSD versus that PSD. So this glyph enables you to go from the frequency domain to then start considering fatigue analysis. For those of you familiar with NSoft, this would then, some of the capabilities, for example, in what would be FLF in the old NSoft days. How many people have ever used NSoft? Okay, all right, so for those of you, previous generation software, this enables you then to get something that you could then do a fatigue calculation. So jumping forward again to version 9, one of the things we've added of version 9, and this is a constant need that I have to constantly look at, is file format support. Because although we are, we're all part of HBM, and our software supports, as well as we can, HBM hardware and the data acquisition, we also accept and are quite happy to help you read files from other sources. We don't expect you necessarily to always use our data acquisition. We know you're going to be bringing in data from other boxes or other sources, Excel spreadsheets. And so it's very important to me that we make sure that you can get the data into GlyphWorks that you need. So that's an ongoing demand, is making sure we add new file formats and latest versions. One thing we added at version 9 is direct reading of data out of multi-body dynamics simulations. So multi-body dynamic simulation, this is a CAE code that is actually solving F equals MA. It's solving, what are the loads going into a kinematic system, and then it's calculating forces and displacements at various points in this computer simulation. And this can be really helpful for durability, because I don't know if you've noticed, but it can be really hard to measure exactly what you want to measure when it comes to durability. It's really hard to get the strain gauge right where you want it. It's really hard to get your load cell on exactly the component that you want to get the loads on. And so it's become quite common for durability simulation to use multi-body dynamics simulation to input what you can measure and what you do know, maybe a road surface, and then calculate what you can't measure, things like internal loads on a component. So we added support of this release to read directly the output files from MSC's Adams software and also Altair's Motion Solve results files. So we can read those files now directly in GlyphWorks. And those files, I mean, you talk about having large files from data acquisition. These files can get really huge because it's a computer and you can ask it to do all sorts of dumb things. You can make it calculate all sorts of channels. And so actually I think it's quite a benefit if you're using Adams to be able to directly read these files, because they literally can be gigabytes in size, and they're ASCII files, which doesn't necessarily help, but they are, I think this is a big help. And I'll mention that again tomorrow when we talk about Design Life. So these are ASCII files. They're read in directly in GlyphWorks and Design Life, and they're read in directly as time series files, all the channels split out. I just wanted to highlight here, this is some new capability in version 9 for helping you present your data and reporting and visualization of those things. So this is a small thing, but it's the kind of thing I think it's worth highlighting, because if you don't know about it, then you'll be going for the next 2 years wishing you could do this, and it's already there. So here's a thing that we have added in 9, which is the ability for built-in options for being able to format numbers better. There was some control in terms of number of significant figures shown in displays, but this enables you now to control it in both the metadata display, so it's inside the glyph, and also in your studio report, the studio table display. On a per column basis, you can control exactly the resolution, the formatting of all your number columns. So for example, in this case, you would say in the metadata display, you'd go into the properties, you'd pick the metadata items you want to show in your table of results. Everybody know what I mean when I say metadata, correct? Yeah? Metadata display. So now I've got an additional 2 columns here, which is the format and the format value. So now I can select for every metadata item how I want to present it, and I can also then get, in this case, I'm looking at 2 decimal places, for example. So I can then set every column. I've made them both the same here, but obviously they're individually set. Or, for example, I can set it to be exponential form, 4 significant figures. That's up to you, how you want to present it. Now, what we've also done is expose that capability of number formatting at a pretty basic level as a calculator function. So we are providing a format function using a fairly typical sort of like Fortran type formatting statement. So you can now take any number in GlyphWorks and create a formatted string, which you can then use in, say, a studio report as part of your output. So now, this is just something to help tidy up, make results more legible, more clearer in your reports. On the same subject of reporting, we've also, again, we try and do this at every release. We try and improve what we've got in terms of reporting capabilities. And this release, some of the things we put in Studio was literally just trying to improve the quality of the output. So we spent time working on the JPEG export, and we've improved the quality of the export. It could get a little fuzzy in Studio. We've put, so now the export quality of the JPEG coming out of Studio is now much, much improved. Real high quality export. You have also, obviously, you've got the option to use different formats, like you can use a PNG file, which is a pretty good quality graphics output as well. But JPEG's now improved, and that has knock-on effects on other formats. So if you export, for example, to a PDF file now, the quality of the PDF file, the resolution you get out, hopefully that's going to be more usable for you in terms of that quality of export that you see. Another thing that we've done that I've been requested several times before is if you're using Studio to lay out your report page, you export multi-page report. What we've done now is made sure that we can fully support the landscape and portrait options, so you can actually mix and match. On different pages, you can jump between landscape and portrait if you've got multiple pages. Previously, that you couldn't jump between the two. So now the export does properly export, like here in Word. If you set it to be landscape export, it will export a landscape export. It's not forcing everything to be landscape, so to be portrait. So that's improved. So I think you'll find the export and also both A4 and letter size paper. We've done work to make sure we've optimized the layout, so you should get a better control of what comes out into your report pages as well. So if you haven't used Studio for a while, it's worth taking version 9 and having a play with it and seeing how that works for you in terms of a quality report output. And again, a usability option is you can either use Studio standalone to design your report, or if you don't use Studio very much, you can also have all the same capabilities directly in GlyphWorks itself. There's a Studio display glyph, and again, one of the minor sort of usability features. I used to find it frustrating, the fact that just trying to resize it and make it so that you could see what's on the screen, and then you have to resize it again. Now, by default, it just fit. There's a fit option, and that's the default. So when you drag on a Studio display glyph, it just automatically shows you the whole page, and as you resize your glyph, it's just gonna pop and show you the whole thing. So again, you can go back to how it was before, but I think you'll find this a lot easier to use. So just an automatic fit option. So again, if you haven't used Studio display glyph for a while, I suggest with version 9 you give it a go, and I think you'll find that there's some nice improvements there, both in terms of usability and in terms of quality of output. And that was the overview for version 9. Any other questions? Any other questions